It's me again, Brianna, aka Dollface PA. If you are new, welcome to my channel. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you can get the notifications when I post weekly. If you are returning, welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in. I love you. Thank you for your support. And today we have a heavy topic. It's kind of taking me a little bit of time to record this video because there are so many emotions that go behind what I'm going to talk about today. If you watched my last video, then you already know what I'm going to be discussing today, which is my experience as a frontline provider in the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, everybody who is aware of what's going on in the world today probably knows that New York City was one of the first and hardest hit places in the United States when the pandemic first began. As a matter of fact, when it first came to New York, I don't even think the World Health Organization had declared it a pandemic yet because it wasn't as widespread as it is now. But wow, a lot of times people would ask me when I would go back home to visit, they're like, oh my gosh, I see it so bad on the news in New York. Is it really that bad? Sis, I want to tell you something. Anything you've ever seen on the news about how bad it was here in New York City in the beginning of the pandemic, it was worse. It was really that bad. And wow. When 2020 started, I think everybody was kind of on the same page. We were all so excited. We're going into a new decade. It's going to be lit. We are just reflecting on the last decade. Everybody's talking about they're going to have 2020 vision. I think it's safe to say most people had really high hopes going into 2020. January was okay, and then it got rocky at the end when Kobe Bryant died. We were like, okay, what is going on? Then February came around, and that's when we first really started to hear the circulations of rumors about coronavirus, also known as COVID. So as a healthcare worker, from our perspective, you guys may or may not know this, but coronavirus is the common cold. And so when they started making a big deal about coronavirus, we were like, why are these people making a big deal about it? It's the common cold. We see it all the time, because we do. We used to see people all the time with coronavirus, and it would be like any other upper respiratory infection, maybe like the flu. You would be sick, you would get over it. So initially in February, when the rumors started flying, I was really downplaying it. My family members were calling me, my friends were calling me. I'm like, y'all, it's hysteria. Don't feed into it. XYZ. Little did I know, I wasn't aware at the time that the coronavirus strand that they were referring to was a completely different strand from the common cold strand that we knew at that time to be coronavirus. The strain that they were referring to is COVID, which is absolutely nothing like anything we'd ever seen before. And so I'm just kind of trying to give a little bit of background to say, even as a healthcare worker, going into it initially, I was very lax. I remember my mom saying crazy stuff are you going to wear a mask on the subway? And I was just like, are you crazy? No, I'm not wearing a mask on the subway. It's crazy to even say that now in 2021, to even think that there was ever a time where I would ride the subway where I'm literally standing shoulder to shoulder, front to back with strangers and not have on a mask sounds absurd now. But back in February 2020, I'm like, what in the world? So my birthday is in February. I had gone out, I had gone out of town for my birthday. And I remember my mom telling me oh, you need to be careful. This coronavirus thing is really getting serious. And I started getting a little aggravated. I'm like, I am so tired of people making a big deal about this. It's the common cold. I'm over it. What is going on? Y'all, I couldn't have dreamt in my wildest nightmare what the next 4 weeks of life were going to be like. And so it was March 3rd when we had our first confirmed case here in New York City. The gentleman was from Westchester. It was all over national news. They referred to him as patient zero. If you were really following it, you may or may not know this. If you're from the New York City area, you probably know about the story. But I remember hearing rumors about it at my job, oh, there's somebody in New York City with a confirmed case of COVID. And we were like, dang, that's kind of crazy. But in the grand scheme of things, we're thinking like, okay, like it's one person. Do you know how many millions of people are in this city? Like, you know, I hope he's okay. But at the end of the day, I'm still not hysterical. I'm still not panicking. I'm still not thinking that this is going to really be anything serious. So much so that 4 days later, I got on an airplane and flew across the country to go to my cousin's wedding, as did my entire family. And I remember my mom saying, like, do you think that we need to wear a mask on the plane? And I was like, oh my gosh, this woman. I was like, no, you don't need to wear a mask on the plane. Like, this is crazy. Like, it'll be fine. Glory be to God. Everybody in my family was okay. We attended a wedding, which now seems insane to think about in pandemic times, but wedding, no mask, everything was fine. Got back on a plane, flew back to New York with no mask. This was all on March 7th, after there was a confirmed case in New York City. And so while we were at my cousin's wedding, I got a text from my manager. She texted all of the team in a group chat and was like, we have our first confirmed case of COVID at our hospital. And I remember that news hit a little bit different for me. So when we originally found out about the gentleman that had COVID in New York City, it was just kind of like, dang. But once it was at our hospital, it hit a little bit different. And I was just like, whoa, what do you mean? Like, there's somebody at our hospital with COVID? Like, is he on our service? Like, have I interacted with this person? Who is this person? Like, so many questions going through my mind. And obviously, when my manager sent the text out, there was a lot of concern from the team. Because, I mean, at this point, we weren't even wearing PPE into the rooms. We weren't wearing masks unless it was like a contact or isolation room. Like, when I say this was so pre-COVID times that it was just like, well, what do we even do? Like, how do we even interact with this person? Like, shouldn't they be like quarantined in a different part of the hospital? March 7th. So flew back to New York, and things unfolded rather quickly. And that is honestly an understatement. When I say things unfolded rather quickly, between March 7th, which was the first case at our hospital, and March 22nd, which is when de Blasio shut New York City down, or I don't know if Cuomo did it or if de Blasio did it, but New York City shut down. That was what? A 15-day time span? Within 2 weeks, this thing went from 0 to 100. Like, it happened so fast. It went from one patient in the hospital has COVID to eventually every patient in the hospital had COVID. And I'm trying to like skip over a lot of this, but this was a very traumatic, very, very, very devastating occurrence, as I'm sure it was for everybody. And I know every healthcare worker probably has their own COVID story, but this is mine. And when I went to work, once I got back from my cousin's wedding, I remember thinking like, wow, this is crazy. Like, so much so that in order to even test a patient for COVID, they had to meet all these requirements. They had to send the test upstate. It took 3 days to get the result back. Like, that's crazy to think about now when we do a rapid test and have the results back in an hour at the hospital. But like, this is what was happening. And in the meantime, patients were getting COVID in the hospital from other patients that we didn't even know were positive. Staff members were getting exposed and getting COVID. So many of my team members went out with COVID. It was crazy. And due to the critical shortage of testing and due to how long it was taking to get the test back, they were literally just saying, like, if you have a fever, like, you're presumed positive. Just go home, quarantine for 14 days. Like, there was no point in even getting tested. Like, you were almost certainly that you had it. And so within 1 week's time span, our hospital was literally turned upside down. The amount and the volume of what we were seeing was unbelievable. Like, I don't even really think there are words to explain what we saw, the amount of death. And, you know, originally, I think a lot of young people were feeling like safe in a way because the media was presenting it in a way as like, oh, well, this is only a disease that makes elderly people that have a lot of comorbidities critically ill. And so, you know, we kind of were going to work every day like, oh, we're young, we're healthy. Like, yeah, this is bad, but we'll be okay. But no, within a couple of days, I saw several patients younger than myself going into the ICU on ventilators, literally fighting for their life, on dialysis, prone, which for those of you who don't know, we're like flipping them on their stomachs, like, because even on like max ventilation settings, they're still desaturating. Like, it was so scary. And like, I think the overwhelming feeling that I had throughout this whole thing was just like a feeling of dread. Like, if it wasn't already bad enough and devastating enough what we were seeing every day at work, there was also like this overarching feeling of like, what if that happens to me? Like, we're front facing with these patients every day. Like, what if I get COVID? Like, what's gonna happen? Like, and so there was just so many things going through our heads, like every single day. And it was so devastating because the hospitals were obviously overwhelmed. Like, every hospital was at 100% capacity. Patients were in the hallways. Like, there was literally nowhere else for the patients to go. Nowhere. There was no beds. They opened up field hospitals. They opened up a field hospital in Central Park to put patients. That is how dire the situation was. And because of this, there was absolutely no visitation policy whatsoever. So the patients were coming in with COVID, critically ill, and they can't have any visitors. So that means families can't come in. So these patients were dying alone. I was having to make several phone calls every day. I'm sorry to inform you, your mother just died. I'm sorry to inform you, your sister just died. Like, pronouncing several people dead every single day, because that also is a part of my job. And I just think that the toll that it took on me the most mentally was the death. And we are trained to deal with death as healthcare providers, but the capacity in which we were experiencing death was abnormal. And I don't think that any human being could go through that type of experience, being so close to it and hearing the devastation on the phone when you're telling them, I think your loved one is going to pass away within the next couple of hours. And then the family members just have this immense sense of guilt because they're like, oh my gosh, I can't even be there with them. I mean, we were doing everything that we can. So many times I took my personal cell phone into the room to FaceTime with a loved one to show them, just so they could say goodbye to their loved one. I mean, absolutely unbelievable. It was horrible. The refrigerator trucks was a very real thing. That was all over the news. People would always ask, like, is there really refrigerator trucks at the hospital? For those of you who don't know, the refrigerator trucks is where they will put the bodies, because so many people were dying at the peak of the pandemic that there was not enough room in the morgue to store the bodies. And I want to tell you that was a very real thing. There were refrigerator trucks where they were storing bodies, and it was as bad as you can imagine it can be. I remember Governor Cuomo, who I have the utmost respect for, he would come on every day and do his press conferences, and they would put the graphs and the charts like on the television to show like how the cases were going. And literally for a long time, like, New York City's curve was vertical. Like, if for those of you who are like more visual, the line like this was going straight up for how many cases we had. And I think for me, probably for any healthcare worker, that was horrifying, because like, we're at work, we're in the trenches, we know that there's no more room for any more patients. Like, how are these numbers still going up like this? Like, where are these people gonna go? There's not enough of us. There's definitely not enough healthcare providers, especially when you factor into the fact that so many people were going out with COVID themselves. So we have a critical shortage. Thank God that our hospital started like outsourcing. They were bringing in travelers. They're bringing in the military. They're bringing in any, like, when I say it was all hands on deck, like, we were working so much. It was absolutely insane. Like, that part of my life from March 2020 to April 2020 was nothing but work. Obviously, like, the whole world shut down. I had all these vacations and trips planned. That was off. Like, don't even talk about it. Like, don't even think about it. Like, you are at work indefinitely. Like, if they need you to come in tomorrow, you go. Like, that's just what it was. And I have an incredible team. The way my team came together and was just so strong and resilient, and we fought that thing until the end. I love my team. And the people on my team are amazing. Everybody gave it heart and soul. I mean, even when we were there exhausted, working a 7-day stretch, it's just like we're still giving it our all, because we know how much it means to the families to be spending these last precious moments with some of their loved ones. And so it was very emotional, very, very, very emotional. a lot of trauma that I think doesn't really get discussed on the part of the providers, because we just kind of have to like take it, absorb it. You really never have time to process the trauma, because it's like, okay, yeah, I'm at work, but I still have like 11 hours left of my shift, so I have to pull it together. And then I'm going to go home and go to sleep and then wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and come back and do it again tomorrow. So I don't really have a lot of time to sit with my thoughts and sit with my feelings. And I think for me, that was definitely a very hard part of it. Another hard part of it was that I was unable to see my family. That was probably the worst part of this for me, because my family is in another state, and obviously nobody was flying on an airplane during this time. Like, my parents definitely weren't coming here. I didn't even feel comfortable going around my parents because I knew I was being exposed to COVID every day, and there was a 0% chance that I was going to be okay with potentially exposing one of them. And so, yeah, Governor Cuomo or Bill de Blasio, whoever did it, they shut the city down on Sunday, March 22nd, 2020. I will never forget that date, because that was also like another moment of like pandemonium. New York City is one of the most populous cities in the United States, and to walk outside and not see a single human being on the street was very, very scary. I remember when the news came through, he was like, effective, I think it was like 8 p.m. on Sunday, March 22nd, everything that is not deemed essential business will be closed. So the essential businesses consisted of, if you sell food, liquor stores were essential, banks, hospitals, pharmacy, things of that nature. Everything else was closed. Like, I mean, I'm talking about let me think of an example. If my special light bulb over there on my lamp went out and I needed to go to the hardware store, I couldn't even do that. Like, the beauty supply store was closed. Like, when I say the city was shut down, you guys have probably seen those pictures of like Times Square where nobody was in Times Square. Like, not a single person was in Times Square. Like, it was scary. It was a scary feeling. And I think it's just like when I really account for like how scared I was every day just going to work, and then I come home and there's this eerie feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm by myself. Like, nobody is outside. Nobody was on the subways. Like, if you've ever been to New York City before, the subways are typically a very populated space. There were so many days I would go to work, I would be the only person on the train. Like, and it's just like, it was just a very, very surreal experience. And it will never happen again, or at least I pray nothing like this ever has to happen again. But even talking about it now, it's crazy to think that I lived through something like that. And this was the case for so long. Like, this went on, I would say probably until about May. So everything was closed. Everything was deserted. It was a very like difficult time because you just felt so isolated. Like, you couldn't gather with people. Everybody was scared of COVID. I know, in a lot of places in the United States, what you believe is what you believe. Some people don't believe in COVID, or they thought that the media was like boosting it up to make it more than what it was. But one thing I'll tell you about New York, everybody in this state took COVID seriously, because we saw firsthand the effects of how it was ravaging our city and how many people were dying. Everybody here was very afraid of COVID. You would not walk outside and see a single person without a mask on. Like, it just wasn't a thing. And for that reason, like, there was like, people weren't congregating. So like, when I would come home from work, I would be at home. I literally was not going anywhere other than work, the grocery store, and the laundromat. That was my life for 2 months. And the psychological toll that it was taking on me at work, and not really having my support system, being able to be close to my family, that was devastating for me. Like, it was absolutely horrible. And, we kind of started to see a little bit of a light in May, I believe. That's when the cases were like no longer vertical, but they're kind of like plateauing, starting to come down. And that was like a breath of fresh air. And, over the summer, things quieted down a little bit, but then we had that surge again in the fall, and it really turned into a surge after the holidays, after Christmas and New Year's, with the gatherings, going into 2021. And even like February, March of this year was pretty bad. Like, it was bad all over again. I still don't think it was as bad as the first go round. And the reason I don't think it is because the first go round, we were just blindsided. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how to treat these patients. Nothing we were doing was working. Everything we were trying, the patients were still dying. It was very defeating to go to work every day and give it your heart and soul, and then like the patients were still dying. Like, it was bad. It was really, really bad. What I'll say is that I could not be more blessed to be where I was at my job with my leadership, my managers, my team members. We all really held each other together during this time. And I mean, at baseline, we have a very close group, but after going through COVID with them, like, that's my family. That was my family during that time. That still is my family. That will always be my family. They were so supportive. We were there for each other. It was just very much so, like, we knew in that dire time, in dire straits, like, we are all that we have. And so that is something I'm super, super blessed and thankful about. People always ask me, did I ever get COVID? No, I did not ever get COVID. God is very, very good and faithful to me. I am very, very blessed to say that I never had COVID. And the reason I know is because they were offering antibody testing at my job. And I actually got tested for the antibody several times and was negative every time. I was also being tested on a regular basis for COVID since I was being exposed to it so much, and I was always negative. So glory be to God. He definitely kept his angels surrounding me, because in all honesty, I don't know how I didn't get COVID. The amount of it that we were around, and like in the beginning stages when we didn't even really know much about COVID, so we weren't really wearing appropriate and proper PPE, there really is no other explanation for it. So I thank God that I never got COVID. I want to touch quickly on how I do believe that the pandemic has changed medicine forever. Sometimes I just think, will medicine ever be the same again after this? You know, it's hard to think that there was once a time where we would walk in patients' room without a mask on. Like, regardless of their COVID status, because every patient upon admission to the hospital gets a COVID swab. So regardless if they are COVID positive or COVID negative, we go in with eye protection and a mask. Not necessarily an N95, but you must wear a mask. Like, nobody goes in a COVID room. Nobody goes in a patient room ever since COVID began without a mask on. And like, sometimes I just think back to the times where we would go in and our patients could see our faces. And it's to the point now of where we have to there's pictures of our faces on our badges. And that's how we identify ourselves with our patients, because they can't see us because we have on a mask. So I think that's one way that medicine will definitely probably be different for a while, if not forever. I don't know if there will ever be another time where providers are front-facing with patients without a mask on. I mean, maybe now, with the rates going down and things getting more under control with the vaccine and things just getting better, maybe one day we'll be able to take the mask off. Maybe we won't. I don't really know. It makes me wonder, just how is it going to be? Like, is this going to be just like, one of those things like the flu, that it just comes and goes seasonally the way the flu does? Or is this going to be something that when it comes, it's like a surge? Well, I guess the flu does that too. I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling right now. But I think that's one way that it's definitely changed medicine. I was going to briefly touch on the vaccine, but I have a lot to say about the vaccine. So I'm actually going to make that a separate video, because if I talk about the vaccine in this video will probably be an hour. As a healthcare provider in 2021, that is undoubtedly the number one thing that I get asked about, the vaccine. What do you think about the vaccine? Do you think I should get the vaccine? Everybody has their own opinions and beliefs. And I do want to talk about it, but I'm going to do that in another video. Lastly, I just want to say that anybody, I think in this pandemic, everybody has lost something, whether it is a job, a loved one, whether it's your sense of sanity because we were quarantined in the house for a year. Some losses are greater than others, but regardless, a loss is a loss. And I just want to say my heart and my prayers go out to anybody who has lost someone in this pandemic or lost anything that was meaningful to them. You're in my heart and in my prayers, and I will see you guys on a higher note on the next video. But I did think that it was important to share the real, because we being real, right? Like, yeah, we being real. So I want to tell y'all, what was really going on. Thank you for joining me. I love you guys. I am very shocked that I was able to make it through this without being emotional, because this is a very, 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 very emotional topic for me. And I tried to keep it as surface level as possible without getting too deep into it. But you guys have an idea of what medicine can be. And this is what we signed up for when we decided to be healthcare workers. And that was one thing that I always try to keep in my mind and in my heart. At the peak of the pandemic, when I was the most scared to go to work every day, I had to remember that this is what I signed up for. Nobody made me be a PA. Nobody. But the day you decide to be a healthcare worker, you are essential. Through thick and thin, through good times, through pandemic times, you are needed. And you have to put on your courageous pants, go in there and do what you were called to do. And you can do it. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys on the next video. You guys be blessed, be safe. I love you. See you on the next one. Bye.